What are subtle red flags at a job interview that say working here would suck? Well, the overtime isn't mandatory, but most folks stick around after hours most days. Spoilers, the overtime is mandatory. Fantastic. You should know that if you choose me for this position, I will be declining the optional overtime. I mean, if you're going to walk anyway, it might be funny to call their bluff. I was once part of a group onboarding for a net job. They handed us all the one-page new hire contract and everyone, except me, signed immediately. When I read the paperwork, I discovered we were signing a mystery document. Clauses included I agree to abide by the personal search and seizure security policy attached, without other pages. There was no way to determine what I was agreeing to. I kept requesting more and more pages until the hour drone said okay. I guess me is just determined to hold everyone up. We will handle you separately if you're struggling so much. After I walked out and drove home, I called the hiring manager to apologize for not taking the job. He informed me that hours reported I had walked out after refusing to be drug tested. I was asked to sign a contract that gave the employer full access to my medical records. It was supposedly for drug testing, but worded badly. I signed every other page and got the job. Would have been very interesting if they felt like drug testing me and they weren't able to. Maybe I'm just paranoid, but I would expect them to anyways regardless of what you did or didn't sign. Once an interviewer straight up asked me if I had any trouble working for free on weekends. I told them my free time is more valuable than anything, and that the only way that I would work a weekend is if they are paying me, and if I felt like working a weekend. She got really mad at me and ended the interview right away. Biggest red flag I've ever seen, because they didn't even try to hide it. When they ask out of nowhere what clients can you bring with you. I interviewed with MetLife Insurance about 20 years ago. They demanded that I provide them with a contact list of no fewer than 100 friends and family. Noped out of that quickly. Sure, it wasn't an interview with an MLM. Last job I worked. Yay. Everyone here is new. But it's totally because of COVID. The boss doesn't like people going out to get lunch because they're afraid you'll never come back. So being your own lunch, you'll get weird looks if you leave on time. It was a Chinese-owned company with heavy Chinese work culture influence, so you were expected to stay overtime all week. Also, the people here are nice, but it's pretty stressful. Also was told by my trainer, you want to know the best advice I can give you? Find another job. This was like my second week in. They're afraid you'll never come back is so funny to me. Was interviewed by a senior programmer and the department head. The department head was continuously making condescending remarks towards the other interviewer. Poor guy just sounded broken. Hope he's somewhere else now. This actually happened to me. Interviewer, do you have any questions for us? Me, what is a challenge this department has recently faced? Interviewer, job security. LMAO, gotta give them props for honesty at that point. He should have just gotten up and opened the door and gestured out. Dude probably about to quit and was like, better save this guy before I dip. A true homie. Everyone looks tired. Also, you don't see anyone in your department before working in it other than the boss. Made this mistake a few times. Was the worst jobs. At my last place of work, the person interviewing me had a printed cartoon on their wall of someone who looked like a bomb had blown up in their face. With the caption, I spoke with boss name about it. I guess we are still doing it. That wasn't subtle at all. But I ignored it. The boss was an absolute tyrant who wouldn't listen to her staff. Consider changing her mind about anything. Or let people do the work they were best suited to do. She wouldn't show up for weeks at a time. The job itself was decent, but she was the worst boss I've ever had. There's a good saying. People often don't quit jobs. They quit managers. I didn't know it at the time, but you'll be wearing many hats was a sign that they were going to give me the work of 4 positions and the wage of 1. I didn't last a year there before I left, and now I won't even finish reading job ads that include that line. That's a non-profit motto, if I ever heard one. It's also a tech startup motto. If you can see the floor before the interview, you can sometimes get a vibe about the place. I once went to interview for a sales position. Aside from the interviewer being 30 minutes late, it did allow me to sit and observe the situation. I realized pretty quickly this was not going to be the place for me. Very quiet except a handful of people on the phones cold calling. Many reps trying to push for contacts on the other end. Just painful to listen to, and when they'd hang up there wasn't really any interaction with coworkers. Just quiet, and then another call. It all seemed very tense. I noped out of there real quick after the 5 minutes the interview took. Dodged a bullet. I had interviewed for a call center job at another place that's a complete 180 from that. Yes, it's a call center job, so it is what it is. But there was laughter on the floor. People talking to floor managers. Just a completely different vibe that was more inviting. I had the opposite experience from your first one. Interviewed for a call center. Thinking I'd probably either just not take it at all, because I imagined it would be really draining, or just do it for a couple of weeks until I found something better. But then decided to stay because everyone seemed really nice and chill about the whole deal. Still working there, and probably gonna stay until I'm done with uni. You are required to wear clothing that has the company logo. You must purchase it yourself from the company. Apostrophe. This is illegal in most US states. Unknown about outside the US. Wait, really, this happened to me in Ohio. They also said I had to give it back. I didn't, lol. Edit. Guys, stop making Ohio look so bad. I once showed up for an interview and the manager wasn't there that day. No one called me to let me know. The assistant manager was not apologetic for the scheduling issue at all. She was literally just like, oh, she's not here today, in a tone that suggested I should somehow already know that. She said they would call me to reschedule sometime the next week. I told her I was currently unavailable MW, but could come in any time THF. She said if I couldn't make time for the interview, I probably wouldn't be a good fit. I said okay, and went on to my other interviews, and ending up working elsewhere. You'd think that would be the end of it, but both the manager and the assistant manager badmouthed me to a few other people in the industry, including one of my friends. Hello. I made time for an interview. You disrespected me by not calling me to let me know it was cancelled. I gave you the times I was available to reschedule, and that was disrespectful somehow? I would be livid. Definitely shows a complete disregard for your time. When you are signing all the forms they give you, and you are taking your time to read over every document so that you can fully understand what you are getting into, and people come in and start telling you that you don't need to read this and that just sign here and so on. I hate that in any situation, not just jobs. Buying something big like a car and they're like, oh, it's just standard contract stuff. Let me decide if it's standard. You know full well, if I sign this, I've agreed to whatever the duck is written. Company, standard contract stuff. Don't need to read it, just sign. Also company, when in court, you should have read the contract to know what you were signing. I interviewed for an independent contractor position on a piece rate. It's hard to predict how much you're going to earn on a piece rate. So to attract me, the manager showed me some pay stubs from his guys. I noticed that 1. He could easily cherry pick pay stubs to show his best guys' best weeks. All that tells me is that I'm likely to make less than what he's showing me, at least on average. 2. The pay stubs were obviously designed to be confusing. They were a full page and absolutely covered in data. He wanted me to be impressed by a dollar amount, obviously not accounting for costs which the contractor has to carry, or taxes which the contractor has to deduct and pay, but he took them away before anyone could have deciphered what the pay period, piece rate, number of jobs or KMS was. 3. He showed me other people pay stubs. WTF? Question mark? Another red flag is that they were desperate to hire because they didn't have enough contractors to deliver the work contracts they'd already sold. I had 2 guys from different offices call me after I'd declined the position who apparently still thought I was considering it. 1. What did the previous employees say when you were considering? 2. If they were that desperate, you could have possibly done some hard negotiation. When you ask, what do you like about working here, and the interviewer talks about the location of the job, it's a great place to live, instead of the actual job. I asked this at one of my first interviews right out of school. My interviewer went, That's a good question. And was ruminating for a good 2 minutes. She went with, we get pretty good parking spots. And quickly followed with, and the people are nice. Apostrophe. People are nice is actually a good one. Sometimes can be the only real reason that the work doesn't outright suck. Jobs where the expectations of the position aren't clear. The person hiring you should be able to give a clear idea of your responsibilities day to day in a practical way. It shows that the company understands what it wants out of the position. I've worked a couple positions that had a really hard time figuring out who was supposed to do what, that lead to a lot of confusion, and both of them had this in the interviews. If the company you're working for can't define what success in that position, looks like you won't be able to either. I was interviewed for a job like this. When I walked into the interview, it was made clear that the job was being offered and was mine if I wanted it. On my credentials alone, it was a library supervisor job at a rare items and fine arts library. An hour into the interview, despite asking several times, they couldn't tell me what I would be doing. Slowly, it came out that there were frequent fights in the library I would need to break up. Student mental breakdowns I would somehow have to handle as a mental health professional. The kicker was that the library held a lot of fine art, and I would need to stop people from, literally, stealing the Warhols. They wanted a librarian who I guess was somehow Batman. I got an email that the position was dissolved 6 months later. We only want the best of the best. Me, how much are you paying? Apostrophe. Minimum wage. Salary. $. Reality. Minimum wage. Salary. Competitive. Reality. Competitive to sweatshops. I was once told sometimes the hourly workers go on strike and they lock us in to keep the production line running. But management brings us steaks and we have an informal agreement with the unions. So you can cross the picket lines once a week to visit your wife. The question was subtle red flags. Jumping on the not so subtle train here. About a month ago I interviewed for a position to run the office of a lawn/landscape company in my town. When I arrived, in-person interview, I waited at the receptionist's desk. A man wheeled out of the office in his desk chair and said to the receptionist, "Got a resume or anything for this one?" Meaning me. He literally looked at my resume for the first time sitting in front of me. He then started asking questions. Never introduced himself. No hi, how are you? Thanks for coming in, etc. He interviewed me while I was sitting at the receptionist's desk, with the receptionist sitting there working. If she took a call, he just paused until she was through. He repeatedly referred to his landscape crew as my Mexicans, and when I politely ended the interview, he said, "Well, if you want you can call on Friday to ask if we want you back for a second interview." Bro. No. I came in for a job interview at 7:30 p.m. The entire staff was still in the office. Should have known right then that 9 to 5 was not ever going to happen. One day I worked until 2:30 a.m. to finish up a big project, and my boss said to me I could come in an hour later the next morning. Gee, thanks bro. With my public transport/travel time, that gives me a solid 2 hours of sleep instead of just the one. I had to work till 6 a.m. into the next day and slept until 11 a.m. and logged in as soon as I could, and my senior still had the audacity to ask me why I logged in so late. She knew I logged out at 6 a.m. because I sent an email with an update. These guys do not care about your health. I don't regret for a minute about leaving that job. I once worked 31 hours straight after something I warned my boss was going to happen if I didn't get more help happened. After 31 hours, I told him I needed to go home and sleep for 6 hours and I would be back. He tried to guilt me into staying and finish. I quit on the spot. He showed up at my house 2 hours later trying to get me to come back. I never answered the door. Nothing is worse than being unappreciated and then indispensable. Edit. To answer questions. I was an ad manager for a company in the Cayman Islands. The managing partner was exceptionally cheap and had his entire corporation of 30 plus tourist businesses, some large and some small, on 2 servers and one dilapidated tape backup system. The tapes were unusable about 25% of the time, but I was told that the backup tapes would never be used. My answer was until they are. Cue this day. I get there at 8 o'clock and the backup tapes had failed. About 4 o'clock the server fails. In order to reconcile the sales and inventory, I was forced to use the last day the tapes worked, rebuild the servers, and then manually input the sales for all the stores. Add to this that the company had canned the only other two people who knew the system on the day I arrived 3 months before, and it was left to me 8 am to 3 o'clock ish pm the next day to get is all and then run reports and then get all the store managers to sign off, and there you go. He didn't want me to leave before the end of the day in case something else happened. He came over at 5 pm. My brother who worked on island told him to piss off. Edit 2. To those who are doubting this happened. It was in 2009, and I was working in the Georgetown in Grand Cayman. For the record, I have had a number of times that I have worked over 24 hours a day in it. Virus remediation and server failures were the usual suspects. However, in Grand Cayman as a expat you had few options. If you make waves you are let go without recourse. If you do keep your job you are gone as soon as your work permit comes up for renewal. In that time, they could make life miserable. Please don't call me a liar, because you have no frame of reference for what I did at the time. Employees are either new hires or have been there for 15 plus years with no in between. There is no room for improvement. It's better to leave for advancement. There are 1 or 2 exceptions to this. I've been at companies where you have the 20 plus year veterans who love what they do and refuse to move up. So you have a young crowd before they move up and an old grizzled veteran crowd. If they seem to relieved that someone actually showed up for the interview. When they feel the need to reassure you in the interview that at that company, they work hard, but also play hard. They don't play hard. It's a sweet shop and they're just trying to convince that it's anything but 100%. Work hard play hard translates to a minimum of 50 hours a week. But you can use our games room because we totally have one. Please click subscribe if you enjoyed this video.